A course in Western civilization has proved too provocative for the Australian National University to take on, yet its Centre for Arab and Islamic Studies has been at the forefront of contentious discussions around Middle Eastern politics and society with minimal backlash from its academics. The centre, which has benefited from sizable donations from the United Arab Emirates and the governments of Iran and Turkey, frequently publishes articles supportive of a Palestinian state and Iran, hosts lectures on deconstructing the extremist narrative and the Islamophobia in post-communist Europe, and has featured guest speakers who are critical of US policy. ANU Vice-Chancellor Brian Schmidt has been forced to defend the centre in the wake of criticism of the university's decision to withdraw from negotiations with the Sydney-based Ramsay Centre over a proposed degree in Western Civilisation and Scholarship program.
The ANU has rejected the Ramsay Centre proposal, but it has nothing to do with autonomy, everything to do with a gutless refusal to stand up to the left. The ANU only reneged on the Ramsay proposal after the National Tertiary Education Union and the ANU's Student Association claimed falsely that the new degree would push a racist and radically conservative agenda, which simply proves Australian universities are fast becoming centres of ideology, not learning. And there are only a handful of people prepared to identify this and speak against it. To be fair to John Howard, the chairman of the Ramsay Centre, he said the decision in relation to ANU and the university withdrawing from negotiations to establish a Bachelor of Western Civilisation degree, John Howard said it was disappointing. Now, John, I'd say to you, if that's the best you can do in standing up to this rubbish, no wonder Western civilisation can't get a foothold. And, of course, Turnbull is silent. Would Abbott have been silent? I don't think so. Well, as always, Mark Latham, it's Mark Latham Day, has entered the fray brilliantly. Quite frankly, in a sardonic way, Mark Latham asks, quote, "What on earth was Paul Ramsay thinking in dedicating part of his estate's $3 billion endowment to coursework at an Australian university? The healthcare mogul should have known the sort of academic disciplines certain to excite the higher education sector." Writes Mark Latham, the Ramsay Centre for the Enhancement of the LGBTIQ WTF alphabet would have had a staff at La Trobe University, home of the Safe Schools program, doing cartwheels. The Ramsay Centre for the Study of Colonial Genocide could have been built as an annex to the Queensland University of Technology's notorious Indigenous Safe Space, helping to develop 364 alternative dates to Australia Day. Yet there was Ramsay, idealistic to the end, wanting to focus academic attention on an obscure concept known as Western civilisation. The irony of Mark's writing is magnificent. Asks Mark Latham, didn't he know enough about postmodernism to understand there's really no such thing as democracy, individual rights, economic development, or advanced health care and education? They're all social constructs, a capitalist conspiracy to make us think that reason and rationality, the values of the Enlightenment, are worthwhile. Poor Paul, writes Mark Latham. He dedicated his money to the Ramsay Centre for Western Civilisation, and last week the Australian National University said it didn't want to proceed with negotiations to create a Ramsay-funded undergraduate degree in this discipline. Sardonic, but true. We've talked about it for months and months. Mark, good morning.
Good morning, Alan.
Well, they've got a Centre for Arabic and Islamic Studies.
Well, we need to cut to the chase here. They don't support a centre studying Western civilisation because they don't support Western civilisation itself. They think Western civilisation is a capitalist conspiracy to make people believe in the virtues of reason and rationality, the values of the Enlightenment, and they want to roll back the achievements of Western civilisation and return to a darker, more unenlightened time. And I think we need to understand this. I mean, the university there in Canberra is making all these excuses under the sun. The truth is, it's senior management, and I've looked at their profiles and I've done the research on what they believe in. Their senior management believes in postmodernism and they don't support Western civilisation. This is a fundamental crisis in higher education where our university administrators are not going to support the foundations of our society. They are initiating radical programs of political indoctrination and reform on their students, that are designed to cause what might be thought of as an incremental creeping revolution. Instead of, workers rising up in factories, as Marx and Lenin spoke of, we've now got this march through institutions, but the outcome could very much be the same.
Good on you. Interesting, outstanding stuff, by the way. You questioned ANU last week about its policy, and its senior communications officer, Aaron Walker, mistakenly emailed you a message that he'd sent actually to the Vice-Chancellor. Just explain that to our listeners.
Well, you can tell these people don't support Western civilisation because they've got none of the competence of Western civilisation. This fool, the senior communications officer, sent me a message that he meant to send to his boss, and it described my request for information about ANU's decision as a high-risk query that was hostile towards the university. All I was asking was information about the university's new admissions scheme, which is another retrograde step. So if you ask a question to a university these days, you're identified as a high-risk query unless you too are one of these postmodernists, unless you too are one of these critics of Western civilisation, unless you too are one of these radical leftists trying to wind back the achievements of our society. I was defined, just like the Ramsay Centre, I'm sure it was defined behind the scenes as a high-risk person for ANU. What happened to academic independence and impartial assessment of information?
I'm just listening to you. You sort of get a bit speechless with all of this. It's just beyond belief. I mean, you can't imagine this going on without sanctions under the Howard Prime Ministership or the Abbott Prime Ministership, can you?
Well, no, you can't. And there's another insidious thing that ANU announced last week. They've changed their admissions policy. You see, students used to get into university based on their high school marks. Now the university there has opened up discretionary criteria where the administrators can decide, are you politically sound enough to enter ANU? And they've opened up a skill, a so-called skill, apparently there's something wrong with you if you don't believe in these things, where you have to believe in the cult of diversity and inclusion. Well, this is a policy, an admissions policy at the university that actively discriminates against libertarians, conservatives and Christians. And they're asking students to sign up to this cult without having met any of the people at ANU that you're supposed to include in your university campus activities.
And of course, taxpayers' money is funding all of this. I mean, the sacking at James Cook University of Professor Ridd, these sorts of people, you'd have an easy sanction, wouldn't you? We're not telling you what to do, but I'm telling you what we're going to do. The money will be withdrawn until such time as this rubbish is removed.
Yes, there's one easy solution.
Easy.
If the federal government had the guts and the common sense, they'd say we're defunding universities that don't support freedom of speech, that don't support freedom of academic inquiry and don't support Western civilisation. If you don't want to be part of our society, don't expect our society to fund you. Instead, you've got to understand Simon Birmingham last week described this new horrendous admissions policy, a politicised admissions policy at ANU, as a win for students and their families. I mean, these ministers and Prime Ministers, Alan, are asleep at the wheel. They have no comprehension whatsoever of the gravity of the situation.
Absolutely, Mark. Good on you. Good on you, Mark. Good to talk to you, as always.
Pleasure. Thanks, Alan.
So Mark has said this week, Australia desperately needs a government willing to clean out the university system, to place it in the hands of people who believe in the virtues of Western civilisation. It is a crisis.